Welcome to McGuire on Wrestling.
What do you guys want to talk about?
Let's give the people what they want. Professional wrestling.
With Mike McGuire.
The happiest Canadian camper in the world. Tell me when I'm telling lies. Give me a hell yeah.
What is going on? What a difference a week makes. Wow. What a week, too. Especially for our little show here, as well as everything going on in wrestling. Everything's changing again. It's not bad. It's all good. Some of it's because of some not so great stuff happening, but we'll talk about that later on. Hello, and welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being here, as always. Let's cut right to the chase. The guest that was on this very show this past week is now the general manager for WWE Smackdown. He talked about it all here. If you missed the interview with Nick Aldis, it's waiting for you now. Last week's episode, McGuireShow.podbean.com. Just look up McGuire on Wrestling on any of your favorite podcatchers, and that's where you will hear Nick Aldis talk about. And now that I've listened back to it, he actually alludes to something happening sooner than later. But of course, until it happens, you can't say anything, right? So it made all the perfect sense in the world why he couldn't just come out here and say, oh yeah, by the way, watch SmackDown this Friday, I'm going to be the new GM. Which, kind of wish he had, but in all seriousness, I mean, this is how it happens. Opportunity happens just by putting in the grind, and if you listen to that interview again, you hear Nick Aldis putting in the grind. That's kind of what this is all about here, too. When I got into broadcasting, I made no bones about it. I wanted to be a pro wrestling announcer, a pro wrestling commentator. But I've been doing music radio and a little bit of talk radio here for going on almost 20 years now. And that's almost as long as Nick Aldis has been wrestling, looking to get his break with WWE. So I get it. I get how you never give up on the dream. And if you're out there grinding, chasing your dream, you get it too. You get it just as much. And that's why we do this, and that's why we live vicariously through a lot of our wrestling heroes, and that's why this show you're listening to right here exists. It's not for my ego, it's not for glory. Look, I'm a professional broadcaster. I've been doing this almost half as long as I've been alive now, and I'm going to keep doing it until I can't anymore. This is what I do. This is my meat and potatoes, and the fact that you're listening to it now and you're not stuck behind a Patreon paywall, and you're not having to pay anything extra for it, is because it's passion, it's desire, and it's a will to get to a place where, yeah, I can make a living just talking about wrestling. That would be the ultimate goal. But in the meantime, you're helping me get there. You're helping me get better just by being here and listening. That's why I say this show will always, always, always be free. Now, like broadcasting, there's other ways to get revenue. Some of you have been amazing in supporting the Team MOW shop at McGuireShow.com. The GWO shirts from the alternate commentary table guys, as well as the new artwork shirts. Thank you. It pays the internet bill. It helps me keep the audio quality up at a point where I want it to be so that you don't have to sit there and strain while you're listening. I got a great job with the morning show on the radio station that I interned at. I came back there by choice. And I'm in a unique opportunity there. So if this week taught us anything, with Nick Aldis taking to our TV, even though it wasn't a big response from the crowd right away, because let's face it, WWE fans might not be as familiar with Nick Aldis as the rest of us are, and knowing his accomplishments through the years. But boy, are they getting to know him fast. He was all over that show. And he said it right here on this show last week that it was something that he hoped could happen. It's the place he always wanted to be, and now he's there. So thanks for being along for the ride so far. And this is proof that anything can happen. Last week, he's hanging out with us. Next week, he's on the biggest show on TV. Nice play. Nice play. Coming up this week, is Tony Khan becoming the thing he once stood against? Will current events in the Middle East affect WWE's events in Saudi Arabia? Why is Raw becoming a little less than again? Kofi the Librarian is a thing. LA Knight has Roman Reigns in his sights. Have we seen enough? And could Logan Paul be winning his first WWE title? Dave Meltzer's here to talk about that and more, but let's give you some of the biggest stories from the past 7 days. Let's start out with the fallout from the ratings battle, or was it even that, this past Tuesday between WWE NXT and AEW Dynamite being preempted for baseball, so having to air against NXT. In fact, it got so heated that AEW owner Tony Khan made some headlines of his own for his online activity. From calling out Triple H and Shawn Michaels to posting memes and even direct messaging fans who spoke against the current MJF Bullet Club Gold angle, Khan has faced a lot of criticism for his activities this week. Stories about Khan's Twitter activity made TMZ as well as Forbes.com. There have been reports that talent on both sides are kind of scratching their heads after all this. WWE's Kofi Kingston is celebrating the opening of a library in his home country of Ghana, West Africa. Earlier this year, Kofi and his mother hoped to build a computer lab and library for kids with room for 100, including 50 computers. It is now known as Kofi's Click Center, or the Kofi Kingston Library and Learning Center, CLICK standing for Computer Lab and Integrated Center of Knowledge for Quality Education. Now, this project was first announced back in 2022. There was a bit of a GoFundMe that went in as well, but the center officially opened this past Friday thanks to Kofi's direct contributions and fundraising efforts. Good for him. Logan Paul made no bones about it. He is headed back to WWE. This was after an exhibition boxing match last night that he won, and he's got his sights set on the U.S. champion.
My true passion, y'all know it. I'm a WWE superstar, so I'm going to be back in the WWE. There are some championships that I want to get. I got my eye on something. I got my eye on someone. I'm an American boy, and I want that U.S. title. Yes, sir. Rey Mysterio, I already beat you once, brother, and I'm coming for that U.S. championship. Let's go!
No news on when Logan will be back on WWE TV, but the timing kind of makes you think this match has to happen at Crown Jewel. And all the best going out to Davey Boy Smith Jr., or Harry Smith as we know him around these parts. Harry ended up being rushed to hospital for emergency surgery, which discovered not only appendicitis, but a case of diverticulitis, which Harry says had him in the worst pain he has ever felt. Harry is still recovering and he's going to be out of action for some time. He was replaced by Filthy Tom Lawler for MLW this past weekend, and will also be missing out on an upcoming Dungeon Wrestling appearance in Calgary. And speaking of Dungeon Wrestling, the main event obviously changing now for a couple of reasons, as friend of the show, the guy that was just on last week, Nick Aldis, we already talked about, is now the general manager for WWE Friday Night Smackdown, so that's going to see him tied up for the show. And with Harry Smith being out, that leaves us without a number one contender. Promoter Dallas Hart is promising an announcement of a new main event later on this week.
You got to stream the alternate commentary table. Every single Saturday, it's brought to you on the McGuire on Wrestling feed. I'm one half of your host, Dimitri Karolis, and I'm here with my partner, Mitch Hondras. Mitch, what is the alternate commentary table?
It's simple. It's the perspective of wrestling from the other side of the railing, the real fans.
That's right, the perspective that you need. You might have a little bit of fun, too. The alternate commentary table. Subscribe free now to the McGuire on Wrestling podcast feed wherever you get your podcast. Cha-cha!
It's time for the Wrestling Observer Insider with Dave Meltzer, McGuire on Wrestling.
Back once again, it is Dave Meltzer from the Wrestling Observer and WrestlingObserver.com. Dave, normally we end the segment like this, but I'm just wondering, what are some of the biggest things you've been talking about this week for you newsletter-wise, and what are some of the biggest stories that you were looking over?
This past week, I mean, the big stuff would have been the Tuesday night head-to-head, which I went into in depth, and the UFC USADA story, which is really interesting, long. I mean, I went through the whole thing with that. And, the New Japan and Stardom had a presentation this week. There was the WWE pay-per-view on Sunday. Mm-hmm. There was, the New Japan had a big show, set up Tokyo Dome main event, set up a bunch of matches for this week and for later. So just like a lot of, WWE creative changes, Vince out and everything. So, there's AEW, there's a million different things going on there, obviously.
I guess that's something kind of interesting that some people have been talking about is Triple H now apparently fully in charge of creative with no Vince influence whatsoever. What's causing this? It's a very Emmanuel decision, and I am expecting to get more information on that imminently. But the short version is that he made the call. It was exactly what he said he wasn't going to do. He said that right. He wasn't going to overrule Vince on anything, that if there was a dispute between the two of them, Vince's way goes, because Vince has all the experience in wrestling. And it's been it's only been a couple of weeks since they actually took over.
and he already made this call. And I could see Vince being very unhappy about it. Maybe not, but it would make sense. Vince has never been overruled. It reminded me very much of when Vince bought from his father in '82, and his father, who had been the boss for decades, started getting overruled by Vince. I see it as kind of the same thing. So, and Ari even made a comment about the stock price, because their stock price is much, much lower than they had expected it to be. And
it's gone down like $23 since open, right? Like it's down quite a ways.
It's down quite a ways. And he said that like the big things were that the Smackdown rights number came in lower than expected. Plus, it was not just the rights, but the fact that they downgraded from Fox to USA, which is a big, big drop in the United States. And then, the second thing he said was the deal with the Saudis investing in PFL. But that should be kind of averted in the sense that UFC just made a big show deal with the Saudis, similar to the WWE show. In fact, it's going to be, similar things. I think it's going to be similar times of the year that they'll probably both be going like within a week of each other. So that should be alleviated. And the other one he said was Vince, kind of, and people took it in a lot of different ways, like that, is it Vince, the way he forced himself back? I mean, him mentioning Vince, was it the fear of Vince selling a bunch of stock at once, which some people brought up to me, and therefore it would lower the market value of the stock? And there's a fear of that. And the answer is that, but the fact that he brought up Vince in that way as being one of the reasons the stock was down was, everyone's going, why would he say that? And it's like, does it feel like Vince is there as a figurehead and they're going to phase him out? That may be too strong, but certainly if you look at it from the outside, you would get that impression. Yeah.
Wouldn't be unheard of. Exactly. And like you said, that's exactly what happened between Vince and his own father back in the day. So
yeah.
Interesting stuff. Okay, well, sticking with the UFC and business for a second, you did mention that they're leaving USADA now. They're not going to be working with them anymore for drug testing. It has since come out, John Pollock reporting, that they are switching over to Drug Free Sport International. Now, some people are saying this organization is a lot less when it comes to standards as USADA. Do you agree or disagree with that?
I don't know. I don't know enough about them. I mean, it's like they do the NFL, and the NFL is supposed to have some of the best testing that there is. They do baseball, they do basketball. USADA obviously says that they're the best, and that these guys are a step down. There's a lot of changes that are going to be made. I think that one of the things they're going to do is, the drug testing is a very weird thing, because there's a certain reality about fast acting drugs in the sense that you can take PEDs at 11 p.m. and by about 11 a.m. or 10 a.m. the next day, they're out of your system, which means that if you're testing, if people know that you are not going to be tested from, let's say, 9 o'clock at night to 10 o'clock the next morning, you've got this window where you can take your stuff and you're not going to get caught. So with USADA, what they did was they would sometimes come to people's houses fairly late at night, not that late at night, but they would absolutely come at 6:30 in the morning. And a lot of people, a lot of the fighters were really upset. And I would, I've told people, I go like, if you want to have real drug testing, you have to accept that some days they're going to come to your house at 6:30 a.m. But people, it's a major inconvenience. But this drug testing is such a difficult thing to counteract the nature of what it is now. So, a lot of fighters were upset. So if this new program is going to be, and like UFC goes, we're going to talk to the fighters. Well, the fighters are going to say, we don't want, one of the things with USADA also is that they have to let you know whereabouts, which means that if you're on vacation, you got to check in with them. I'm in Honolulu, Hawaii, and I'm staying at this hotel in this room. They have to know that, and they can come and do that. I mean, I know that there was talk that the way to get around it was to go to Thailand, that they would not check you in Thailand. So a lot of people who go, I'm doing a month of Muay Thai training in Thailand, was wink, wink, going on a cycle in Thailand, where, so there's so many ways to get around it if you really want to. And, closing the loopholes is so hard. But if you have someone who is, doing it in a less invasive fashion, there will be more cheating because people will figure out how to beat the system. So, it's a very, very difficult subject. I mean, and the change, like again, USADA is going to say they're changing for whatever. I mean, Travis Tygart said they were changing to protect, trying to get Conor McGregor to fight. The UFC said absolutely 100%. Conor McGregor is not fighting until 6 months in the system, which would be April. So somebody there is lying, and I don't know which side it is, but it made for there was Tygart talked to the press. UFC threatened to sue him. Said if you don't retract it by 5 o'clock on Thursday, we're going to sue you. Tygart said I'm not retracting anything. I stand by everything I said. They're saying he's Britney Spears. Having a meltdown. That's Dana's words. So it's like it turned into a very and Dana basically going like who would ever hire this guy the way he melted down with us. And it's like, I don't know what the thing is. I do know that, Tygart goes, we're not going to, make exceptions because someone's a big star, in the McGregor situation. But it's like you already did with John Jones. Everyone did with John Jones. I mean, it's the reality. I wrote all about the John Jones situation because John Jones was the credibility issue with UFC drug testing, with USADA drug testing, with everyone. And they all failed,
right.
It's like, when there's a big star, they will change the rules. I mean, I was very familiar with the John Jones thing, and I was very familiar with the Tom Lawler thing, obviously because I know Tom Lawler. And it's like they were handled 100% differently because Tom Lawler was a mid-level fighter, and John Jones was, maybe the greatest fighter of all time. John Jones failed twice. That should be a 48-month suspension. And he was suspended for 15 months. And, the reasons he was suspended, that he got off, they don't hold any water. I mean, that's just the reality of it. They did it because they didn't want John Jones suspended for 48 months because he's a big star.
Because there's money. Exactly. Okay. Fair enough.
There's money in John Jones, and there's money in Conor. There's lots of money in Conor, at least for a few more fights. I mean, obviously, I think Conor's probably past his prime. He had a terrible injury to come back from.
Right.
And I don't know how effective he's going to be now. And, if he comes back in 1 or 2 fights and doesn't do well, at some point your drawing power goes, you know what I mean? It's like nobody's drawing power lasts forever. And it usually it lags behind your athletic ability by a couple of fights or years. But with Conor, I mean, we're getting at that point where he's already had the losses. Now it's just a question of how many times he can talk his way into being a big draw. It's sort of like with Nate Diaz. It's like, okay, we know that we've seen Nate Diaz lose badly. How many times can we fall for his shtick that he's the badass and this and that? And it's like there's a lot, there's a while, and Conor and Nate Diaz probably could still draw big, but I don't think they're going to draw like they used to.
Conor came out. He's had a couple big fights now that have drawn a lot of numbers, but he didn't win them. And that's the problem.
Not the recent ones. I mean, he won. Look, Conor's a 2-division world champion. He was great.
Oh, exactly.
But he's had bad injuries. He's if he's going to move up to 170, he's going to face harder hitters, and he's not going to be as quick. And one of his things was quickness and accuracy. And I mean, we'll see. Conor's going to fight probably in about 5.5 months, I'm going to guess.
Okay.
Whether it's Chandler or somebody else, and we'll see what happens. I mean, if he can win some fights, he's going to go back to being a big draw. I mean, his first fight back should be a big one. After that, like if he doesn't do well in the first fight back, I think that's when you start being like BJ Penn at the end and people like that were one-time big draws that stop being big draws.
No, exactly. And I guess we'll just have to wait till April or so. Okay, let's go to actual wrestling talk here. Almost actual wrestling talk here. Did you happen to see the trailer for the Von Erich movie, The Iron Claw? Yeah, what do you think so far?
It's funny. I know someone, and we actually had a story in The Observer when they had one of the screenings. It was a secret screening. And obviously the movie, one of the reasons you do these secret screenings is to get feedback. Mm-hmm. And they will, there will be changes made based on it. But the feedback that I got from the screening was not that positive on the movie. Now the finished product might end up being great. I don't know. I mean, as far as the trailer, it was a trailer. It's like, I can't really say. I mean, I kind of, like some of the quotes and things. I mean, I remember them. They're real. And I know that I'm going to probably go the opening night. It breaks because, again, I followed the story. I've written more stories. I've written so many stories over the years about the Von Erichs. I mean, probably more than anyone. And I lived in Texas during their heyday. And, I consider myself friends with Ross and Marshall, and I know Kevin. And, it's
for those that aren't familiar, because I mean, Ric Flair even said in an interview a couple days ago on Busted Open, he said this movie probably came out 20 years too late for a lot of fans because of the timing of when everything happened with the Von Erich. So for younger fans that may be listening and aren't familiar with just how big the Von Erich family were, can you give us some insight on that? And like you said, I mean, you covered the entire thing top to bottom here. So
I lived. The family was they were household names in North Texas. Because Fritz was the big wrestling star. Fritz Von Erich was the big wrestling star from the mid 60s through the early 80s. And then his sons all got involved, and the sons were very, very popular with the kids, the teenagers and everything like that. And then, they started dying. David died when he was 25 in Japan. Then Mike died of a suicide a couple of years later. Then Chris died of a suicide. And then Kerry died of a suicide. So it was this family of 5 wrestling brothers, and Kevin is the only one who's still alive. And, and has been the only one who's still alive since 1993, for 30 years now.
And wildly popular. Like when you say, household names, I mean, they were packing arenas. They were packing big, big buildings long before WWE was even touching WrestleMania.
When they were really big, their heyday was 83, 84, and WrestleMania was 85. So that's true. They ran Texas Stadium with Ric Flair and Kerry, and they ran a couple of other stadium shows that did over 25,000 people. And, they would run every Friday night the Sportatorium. And there was a period where they would sell out, every single week, even during high school football season, which was pretty impressive. But it was a short window. I mean, it really was 83, 84. 83 was super big. 84 was big. By 85, it was on its way down. By 86, it was weak. So it was a short window, but it was there. And even after the window was over, everyone knew who they were. It's just that the fad was over by 86, and Kerry had gotten in a bad motorcycle wreck, and David had died. And I think the death of David, was just giant, as far as changing that, because just a lot of different, David was the one who was going to be the world champion, I think. And David was the one who was, they were all different. Kerry was the most charismatic of all of them. David was the one who could be a heel. I mean, they'd never do an angle. I shouldn't say never, but I don't think they'd ever do an angle with the brothers against each other. That was not in the MO. But I think David's death meant, changed things. I think Mike's death meant, changed things a lot. Once you have your heroes and you start going like, what's causing all this? And their star really dropped. But name recognition wise, yeah, they're big, big, big there. Not as big now. It's 30, it's over 30 years. It's since the peak. It's actually 39 years since the peak. So Rick was right in the sense that, this probably should have been made 25 years ago when people had more nostalgia for them because it wasn't so far behind, this is the heyday of the Von Erichs was 83 and 84. That's a long, long time ago.
Yeah. Let's go to more current day stuff here. There's a lot of talk about the MJF Bullet Club Gold angle and the roll of quarters, basically saying it's an anti-Semitic comment. There's, of course, the strife going on in the Middle East right now. Some are saying it's poor timing. Others are saying this is what wrestling is. I mean, the tradition of edgy content during real-life conflicts is a very real thing, but how do you think that fits in today's day and age with what basically fans tend to react to and what they like and don't like?
Well, there's always going to be, especially right now. I mean, it's a thing where, because of tribalism and everything, there's every minor thing the other tribe is going to jump on. It's kind of like politics. Some of it's bullshit. Look, AEW, I watched this Saturday. MJF was out there doing talking about anti-Semitism. They took the quarters away, replaced it with the ring. They basically tried to they got away from what they were doing. What they were doing before, did they go in there to try to get heat based on anti-Semitism on Tuesday night? I don't believe that for a second. I think that people took it that way. I think it wasn't bad. I think it should not have been done that week, because that week was a week where I mean, it's a time where people will jump on it, and they got negative mainstream pub. You never want that in that way. And they took it to heart and they moved on. And that's all I could say is they moved on. I mean, I was not affected, but I could certainly see that people were, some people were for the right reason, and some people were for the wrong reason. But some people were. It got bad press, and because of that, you move on and I don't say try to turn it up and get away from it. You could Vince and just go even harder like Vince did.
Right.
You just get in more trouble. I mean, Mark Kapani, Muhammad Hassan lost his whole career because Vince couldn't back off. The WrestleMania in 1991 had to move indoors because people weren't buying tickets to the show because the edgy content was edgy in the wrong way. So it's just kind of like, sometimes you live and learn. It was, I mean, in hindsight, was it a mistake? Yeah, it was a mistake. They acknowledged it by changing the angle.
Okay, and acknowledging it by changing the angle is a good thing. We have to talk about what happened in between that, though, because another mainstream story that started making its way out of this was the fact that Tony Khan wouldn't stay off of Twitter and actually got to the point of DMing fans, allegedly, and saying that here's why we're doing what we're doing and everything. Like, I asked the question at the start of the show here, with things like that, and I'm not going to, again, AEW has been great to work with on this show. They always give us great content and things like that. And I'm not attacking the guy, but when you see that happen, I mean, is this a case of Tony Khan? He's got to watch out because he's kind of becoming the thing he said he was standing up against when AEW started, and that being Vince McMahon. Do you know what I mean? Like this is the kind of thing I would expect Vince to do,
Yeah, I think it's probably for the, I think that he probably should have stayed off Twitter. I mean, he was using it to promote stuff too, but I think this was a bad week because actually not so much the angle, but because people will, no matter what he says this week, people take it as sour grapes because the Tuesday battle, WWE beat AEW on Tuesday night.
Right.
And that happened. And I think it's probably good for about a week or so to stay away. I mean, come back when, I'm not to stay away in the sense of don't promote Collision, don't promote Rampage. Of course, he should promote all those things hard as he can. That's what a promoter does. But I mean, as far as making any comments, the comments on like WWE and the one with, when his mom was, and, all that story's true. His mom was in horrible, horrible shape. Thank God she's not anymore. And that was when, Levesque got some power and started, contacting a lot of people there, trying to get them to break their contracts. And, and some of them went to Tony and goes, look, this is what's happening. And it was all at the same time. So he's, but to go, this is why it's personal. It's like, you don't have to tell the story this week. He told the story this week because it was the 1-year anniversary of his mom being in the hospital. But it's just like I would have waited. I would have waited to tell that story because, like I said, everything this week makes it. Is it all true? Yes, it's all true. Does it come across badly because they just lost? Yes, it does.
Well, I think tweeting images like bald a-hole from a TV show and stuff like that. This is what I'm talking about though. Where even if it is that case, that's a different thing. But that does have to do with that. But that is what people do in promotional wars. It's what Bischoff did. It's what Vince did. It's what Bill Watts did. It's what Dusty did. It's what everybody. Dana White. Scott Coker never did it, but Dana White, they all did stuff like that. Now, I would not have done it. I don't think that serves any purpose. I don't think it makes him look good. The last time they went head to head, which was the Smackdown and Rampage thing. Right. Yeah.
He went really, really hard. And I thought, oh God, this is going to be bad because, Smackdown head to head with Rampage, you think Smackdown's going to win. And Rampage ended up winning that head to head battle, which really pissed a lot of people off. But that's how it went down. But this one wasn't going to go down that way. It's like I knew what was going to happen. I told people ahead of time that this, that it was going to go down basically the way it did. And the next one is going to be a demolition because it's going to be Smackdown on the network against Collision head to head in a couple of weeks in November.
Right.
And that one's going, WWE is going to murder him. I mean, that's just how it's going to go down.
Yeah.
And so that's also a week that he probably should. I mean, he should promote the hell out of the show, but
just stick to promoting the show and leave everything else out of it, right? Like that's the way it should be. That's the way it should be. I mean, he got a headline this week on Forbes.com. Tony Khan is losing his mind on Twitter amid AEW.
Yeah, but that's all. I mean, it's like,
I know it's a headline. I get that.
It's a headline, and it's a really bad faith headline. But yeah, I mean, it's like people are looking out to get this one. But yes, he should. If I was him, I would not be talking about WWE on Twitter right now.
We'll wrap this.
My product.
We'll wrap this with one listener feedback here, and this was on the MOW Facebook page, Team MOW. It's from Dick Gaeta. He says, Tony Khan is honestly a major reason why I have trouble getting behind AEW. He's the face of the company, although whether he should be is a different conversation. He's acting like a clown. This is people that want to support AEW.
I mean, okay. There's something there, of course, if you don't like the owner. But look at WWE. I mean, like we're going.
But this is where Vince was when Vince was in power, and now they're saying these things about Tony. Like this is what boggles my mind.
Yeah, but I mean, look, when Vince was at his nuts, his worst, the Bob Costas thing, the Army Containment thing, which are way, way further than this. It's not like it hurt the popularity. I mean, when it comes right down to it, at the end of the day, if you put on a show that people want to see, they're going to see it in spite of, the fact that they don't like Vince McMahon. We've seen that over and over and over again. And if they don't like it, they could love Vince McMahon. It doesn't matter. They're not going to buy it. Right. And the same thing goes with AEW. In the end, it's like if they don't like Tony Khan, but they love the product, they're watching the product. If they don't love the product, they could love Tony Khan, they're not going to watch the product. So it's like, I mean, history already tells us. Look at Dana. You know what I mean? I mean, Dana's probably, as far as public. I mean, Vince's a lot of it is in the weeds and things like this, but some of it's been public. But Dana, the one thing I'll say with Dana is, for better or for worse, Dana's all. Dana, is big in public. He blasts everyone he doesn't like constantly all the time. I don't think that the UFC's success or failure will ever be dependent upon what people think of Dana. Because if that happened, UFC would be down the tubes.
Well, Dana's a two-headed coin to begin with, though. Dana will say one thing terrible about someone and then say they're the greatest person next. So I mean, that's Dana White in a nutshell. So
yeah. Yeah, I suppose so. I mean, that's certainly my relationship with Dana in a lot of ways. We'll have big fights, and then 2 weeks later we're fine. I mean, that's kind of our history. But not in the last couple of years. We've been fine for years. But yeah. But there were, and I mean, we would fight over, essentially, a ticket advance. I'd reveal a ticket advance, and he would go crazy because it's lower than, he wanted out. He didn't want people know that a show was selling badly, and he just went off on the fact that I revealed the advance. I mean, of all things, it's like, this is what we're fighting over? A ticket advance?
Yeah.
So whatever.
Okay, a couple quick TV things here. FTR being squashed by Big Bill and Ricky Starks. I mean, a lot of people were like, oh no, FTR is getting out. But I mean, this makes a ton of sense, right? If you're trying to build stars like Big Bill and Ricky Starks. Everyone
right now, I mean, one of the things with AEW is there really is a movement to build new people. And that will take time. And when you're building new people, you are to a degree until they get over, going to sacrifice numbers, because that's just an end of trying to. But if you watch, like last night, I was watching. They're trying to build Sky Blue, trying to build Kyle Fletcher. They're trying to build, and like not everyone's going to make it. They're trying to build Big Bill and Ricky Starks. And I think Ricky's catching on, and that's what you do. And Powerhouse Hobbs. Look at Chris Jericho and Powerhouse Hobbs on Tuesday. I mean, that was as much of a, we had two major squashes with top acts, FTR and Jericho, getting squashed on their own volition. FTR, I'll tell you, the FTR squash, that was their idea. And I can tell you 100% without even anyone telling me this, that there's no way that Jericho lost to Hobbs that way without Jericho going like, I mean, no one's going to tell Jericho do this.
Throw himself under, yeah. Okay.
That's where Jericho's going like, you know what? I want to make this guy as big as I can. And he went out and did that. So, I mean, it's one of the things I got to say. I mean, whether it's going to end up being the good or the bad, time will tell. But when you look at that locker room right now, you have some pretty damn unselfish people, as far as willingness to put themselves under to make new people. And that's the thing. And it's going to take time. And not everyone's going to get over. Just because you squash Chris Jericho in 5 minutes doesn't mean that you're now going to be able to sell out, on your own in a pay-per-view. Hopefully that's
Jericho can bounce back. Hobbs gets the boost. Absolutely.
Hopefully, you keep beating people over and over again and they don't bounce back. So it's kind of like, look at like the situation with Omega, just as an example. I mean, it's like every pay-per-view, look at it, always losing every single pay-per-view. At some point you got to win or you're going to lose your standing. Now, somebody like Omega can go through a lot of losses and still survive. And someone like Jericho, even more, because Jericho has all that tenure as being a star. Jericho will always be a star. But Jericho's going to have to get some back now too. I mean, that's just the reality. So,
Okay, last thing here, Dave, before we go, and thank you as always for the time here. Booker T was rather outspoken about wrestling media, these press conferences that are happening after shows, and even brought up your name specifically, talking about how basically he's not a fan of the idea. He's not a fan of wrestling journalism. And I'm just wondering if you A, heard about it, or B, have anything to say.
I didn't hear what he said. I didn't hear what he said. He said word for word. But I mean, I always go through this. It's like if you and people in wrestling sometimes, like, they don't even understand. It's part of entertainment. It's part of sports. So he said something like they should ban this guy, and it's kind of like, would you ban? Would you go in there and if you were the top entertainment writer in the country and you ran a studio, would you go in there and ban someone like that? I mean, number one, you couldn't if they were that good, and they wouldn't. And WWE isn't going to do that, I don't think. And maybe they would, and if they do, so what? I mean,
well, he said that you specifically are killing the business.
Yeah, well, that's the business is from an economic standpoint the strongest it's ever been in history. So if that's the case, it's like, okay, when you say stuff like that, that's the one where I go like, can you sit there for 30 seconds? If I was killing the business, how could the business be bigger than it has been right now? I mean, at worst, you could say I've had no effect. Okay. And the business is growing. Okay. Or the only other effect I could have had is positive because the business is strong and it's better for the wrestlers. The talent works less dates. The talent, the death rate of the talent, my God, it's so much lower. And I mean, it's like, the scheduling is so much better. The money is so much better. I mean, it's like, why? That's the thing when people go, in my day. It's like, in your day, guys were working 300 days a year, 300 days a year, and making a fraction of what the guys make now and killing themselves. And now guys are killing themselves in a different way, which I'm not, I mean, again, I talk about the injuries constantly.
You're talking about in-ring. Yeah.
Yeah, we need to tone down certain things because the injury rate is too high, without a doubt. But that's just, again, like, it's ludicrous. He said, "I'm killing the business that's never been healthier." It's wonderful. It's like, think for 30 seconds before you talk.
Well, the funny thing, I saw you tweet something about being a mirror for people that you interact with. I've always appreciated the Dave Meltzer I get here because we have fun, insightful conversations. We don't always agree all the time either, but I appreciate your expertise and your knowledge through the years and the insight you're able to give. So thank you again, Dave, as always, for the time here. And I'm not saying that to butter your bread. Like, we've had disagreements too. It's amazing, but the thing is that talking about wrestling is what we do here, and I think that does nothing but enhance business. It gets fans more involved. It makes us feel like we're part of it, and people like you are a big vessel into why we got into this stuff. So, again, I'm not saying this to blow smoke just because you appear on my show every week. I'm saying this because I want everybody to like everybody. I'm this hopeful optimist that
That's not.
Oh, I know. It's ridiculous, but
in a tribal business,
yeah. But in the meantime, man, I mean, if we don't take this stuff as seriously as some people do, then I think we'd all be better off. But like you said, right now we're in the Wild West still with the internet and everything the way it goes, and it's just the way it is. So, Dave, I'm just going to say thank you, man, this week as always for the conversation. Have a great week, and we'll talk to you again next week.
Okay, have a great week.
McGuire on Wrestling.
Well, before we go, I wanted to bring up some of your feedback over the last week from the Team MOW Facebook page and just conversations I've had with some of you off to the side as well. It's something I've been wanting to do for a while here, and I'll tell you completely honestly, we have a radiothon coming up on The GOAT, my radio station that I work with, and I'm kind of quarterbacking a lot of that stuff right now. So I haven't had as much time lately to really delve into wrestling discussion as much. And as the weeks go on, we're going to start bringing on some more guests here to have their say as well. But there were some interesting things that came up on the Facebook page I wanted to go to. And we'll start off with Martin's comments about Tony Khan's actions on Twitter, or X, this week. Martin's always a great participant in chat, sometimes brings up more negative things than I'd like to talk about, but this was a fair one, I think. And he said, what is your take on Tony Khan rants on Twitter this week? For me, I feel like somebody within AEW should really sit down with him and explain to him how counterproductive all of his rants are. First, I got a laugh out of them because they were ridiculous, and you could easily counter his arguments by showing how he's pretty much doing the same thing that WWE is doing. But then I found that a fan actually criticized him for letting that MJF Juice Robinson angle, and Tony sent him a DM to make fun of him, which I feel is something in his position as the owner of the company shouldn't do. You know what? I agree 100% with this. We talked about it a bit with Meltzer already. I think that Tony is in this phase right now where he's really having to play defense, and I think that he's in a position where, frankly, AEW isn't everybody's favorite thing anymore. Now, that's not saying that I want them to curl up and die and go away. What I'm saying is that AEW is now going to be facing more criticism because fans have invested the money. We've invested the time, the travel. Hell, I've gone across this country literally following AEW shows when they came across Canada. I wanted to succeed. I really do. But as a wrestling fan, we've grown up, at least in our generation, being the wrestling fans who were embarrassed to be wrestling fans. You know, you always got that stigma. People that like wrestling, you know, that chick on Instagram or whatever, right? And she's like, what's the biggest turnoff for you? People that like wrestling. Yeah, well, kiss this. But at the same time, that's a stigma. You know, you can like all the silly vampire movies you want. You can like all the silly sports that you want. I mean, honestly, sports in general, yeah, huge business. But at the end of it all, it's still a game. So wrestling fans especially don't want to feel like they have more reasons to be embarrassed to be a wrestling fan. And when one of those reasons is the owner of the company, we went through this with Vince McMahon, and now we could be going through it with Tony Khan to a much lesser extent, but it still is a thing. So Martin, thanks for the commentary there. Got a lot of people saying that Monday Night Raw just isn't what it used to be again. And I think that's fair. I think that Raw's been going through a bit of a flux lately. There's also been the talk about the creative news with Vince stepping down. So things might change as far as creative on Raw goes. But in the meantime, I guess the real question is, what happens next for WWE's Monday Night Raw, for the big flagship? I mean, when it comes down to Raw being exciting, it's always going to be a slog. It's always a 3-hour watch. It's always hard. Trust me, when Joe and I were doing Tuesday Morning Cooked, the hardest part about doing it wasn't doing the podcast. It was waiting so long to do the podcast because the show is so long. So Raw has been offering a lot of great stuff lately, but unfortunately, it's starting to slow down a little bit. And I think part of that has to do with the fact that they know they're in a battle against Monday Night Football viewers, but they're not going to win that battle. So maybe they're coasting a little bit more, whereas on the Smackdown side, everything's exciting, everything's new. Now, tomorrow we have the season premiere of Raw, and this entire commentary might blow up in my face. Because let's face it, when they do these season premieres, usually they got something big planned. What that's going to be, I don't know. But it could be very interesting come tomorrow night. Now, I know some of you still haven't checked out the alternate commentary table yet with Mitch and Dimitri. It is a really fun show, guys. I'm telling you, if you want a half an hour where you just hear a couple of dudes that are basically sitting at a bar, but not sitting at a bar. They're sitting in a studio, and they're rapping about wrestling the same way we would talk about any other sport or entertainment thing that we love or hate or love to hate. They brought up a really interesting question this week, and it had to do with John Cena's latest run. And the guys are saying they're already getting a little tired of him. And I'm like, guys, we're almost done. Like, if anything, he's doing exactly what he should be doing. We're in what, week 4 already of the 8-week stretch? One of the weeks he had to take off already. We knew that. But week 4 of an 8-week stretch, we're past the halfway point now. And what's he done? He's come in. He's really helping LA Knight out. and he's still got a month to do what he can to contribute. Now, the NXT thing, I mean, that was something entirely different, and that was, I don't even know what to do when we talk about that. That's why I didn't hammer on it so much, because everybody's talked it to death already. Look, it was 1 week of head-to-head shows. It's done, and yeah, WWE won the rating. Who cares? Like, honestly, yay, they won. Good for them. We still got all the wrestling we wanted and more. And again, this is something where wrestling fans, I think we just got to look at it from a look at what we got perspective rather than a who's better than who perspective. Because when it comes down to it, we all win. We all get wrestling. And again, that's the hopeless optimist in me. I get it. That's something that Jason Agnew used to always kind of mock me about, is the fact that I just want everybody to be happy. I do. You know why? Because it's a great thing. And that's why we love watching it. And that's why I love talking about it every single week here with you. We're going to do it again next week. And don't forget, you can subscribe to these shows. You can get everything in your inbox automatically. Plus, the YouTube page is taken off. Holy cow. We're getting like massive views and listens on some of the episodes and some of the commentary and interviews. I don't know why I'm sounding like Christopher Walken all of a sudden, getting massive views, but they're there. And so if you're not subscribed to the YouTube yet, you want to get that as another way to watch or listen. That's there for you. Team MOW Shop is happening. McGuireShow.com. That is how you can, if you wish to, financially support the show. Again, you don't have to. You're going to get all the content all the time. No charge. Nothing. As always, if you want to get a hold of me, you can find me at McGuire Show on all the socials, or send me an email, McGuireShow@yahoo.com. Until next time, as always, thanks for listening and letting me do what I do. Play safe, drive safe. I'll be seeing ya.